Okay, welcome to the FLF pod brought to you by J3VC. Here with my co-host, Jeromie. And today we're going to talk about brotherhood, relationships in the modern era. And so, Jeromie, do you want to kick us off? And you're over in Thailand right now. And
Yes.
so, how's it been over in Thailand?
Absolutely fantastic. What do they call it, Jason? The land of 1,000 smiles. Yeah, come over here for some business. Got some family over here. So at the moment, visiting some friends and having an absolute blast. How about yourself?
We all know what that means.
Yeah. Yeah, not very much sleep. Lots of stuff that I like to do, like went and saw some fights last night, a bit of golf, a bit of go-karting, just, having a great time.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
one of the features is we do have like Brotherhood and network all around the world, and whether it's Thailand or Bangkok or in the US or Australia, there's a big network that we're connected with. But today I thought it might be good to talk about brotherhood in the modern era, and so there are a few topics. I think where do we want to kick off? What do you suggest?
All right, why don't we kick off at Bro Code 101, like Bro Code at the time of filming 2024. This is a topic that's been, I think, fantastic and highlighted in shows like How I Met Your Mother and things like that. I think they even wrote some sort of book. Why don't we discuss the Bro Code in the modern life and what we think is best practice instead of not what's done? Why don't we have a chat about best practice and how to take care of your brothers?
Yes, that's a great question, and I think I have a theory on this, and it's with the erosion of authority and of institutions around the world. These like concepts of brotherhood and honor and code and links to tradition, going back generations, has dissipated like now more than ever. And so typically, like it would have been that you were taught these things from your family, from your father, and from your community. But now, like, authority structures and institutions are disappearing. And so, where do these things come from? And then how do you determine like how to find them? I have a theory on this, but what's your take?
On how to find the institutions, you mean, or the brotherhood part?
The brotherhood and the code.
The only real way to find it, because I think you're correct about the erosion of the institutions, is you have to seek it out.
Just froze for a second. Okay, go ahead.
We're back. Yeah, so I think the only way at the moment in the modern day, due to the erosion of the institutions, is to actively seek it out. Yeah, what do you say?
Yeah, I would say you've got to actively seek it out. And there's a great book by Balaji called The Network State. And it's essentially that there's a rise in digital communities, network states, if you will. And I think you're right. Like the communities that have a code of honor and code of conduct are now gathered in the information space for physical spaces. And so before, it used to be, you go to your local neighborhood and you go to your local church or gym or whatever it was. But I think that is now like disappearing. I think part of that is like the globalist agenda, without getting too political. It's part of it is the sameness of what's happening in culture. So like, if you go back a few decades, there is a massive difference between certain cultures and certain countries. But now, if you, for example, like, when I'm back in the US, people all watch the same TV shows, follow the same pop stars, listen to the same. So the culture has become quite homogenized. And I think you've got essentially a difference now of traditional and non-traditional, East versus West, online versus offline. And the world is now no longer kind of physical spaces, but about digital spaces. And I think you're exactly right. You have to go and find and connect in the digital world first.
Yeah. Let me know what you think about this. I think the whole brotherhood is fading due to not being needed. So I would say if you want to be successful, you need it. You need a team. But if you want to work a job and live through your life and possibly get a wife or a family and go through life, you can do it without it. You would just be suboptimal, I'd say. So I think one of the reasons for it going away is because it can be difficult. There can be things you have to do that you don't want to do, and like through self-improvement and through just any other things to try and seek out this sort of brotherhood. It's going to cost you money. You're going to have to try and figure it out. It's hard. It's going to take a lot of brain work. But I don't think it's required today, because you can go on the internet and ask whatever you want. You've got robots now. Like, look at ChatGPT. You've got a question, you go ask the robot the question. The robot will tell you the answer. You don't need the brotherhood, but it's just suboptimal because you've only got so much energy, and you only know so much. But I think one of the reasons for the erosions is, just that it's not 100% needed. We're not, in a cave with the spears at the front of the cave trying to stop lions coming in. Like you don't have brotherhood there, you just die. Now you don't need it.
I think you're exactly right. And if I was being super pessimistic, I would say that that's an intentional move that's being made. Being a little optimistic, I would say, the abundance of technology and access to information and the structure and the pathway laid out by culture makes it super easy not to need brotherhood. I think you're exactly right. Whereas, previous generations, and if you go back, to the Stone Age, you definitely needed brotherhood in order to survive and thrive. So I also think it's not pushed in the culture. So if you look at, the messaging in culture, it's not pushed to have a tribe, have a brotherhood, have a code. These are not strong messages that are pushed out, in the culture itself. So that, becomes perceived as less important. But I would argue, when I look at some of the most successful people who are doing business or out in the world today, I often look back behind the curtain and see that some of the secret sauce is that they've got brotherhood, whether that's a small, strong network or it's actually family members, like a literal brother that's working side by side. And I can think of quite a few examples. If you look at Elon Musk with his brother Kimball, with the PayPal mafia, if you look at even like a guy like Grant Cardone, he's got a twin brother, Gary. You've got Andrew Tate, Tristan Tate. You've got, a lot of successful men have, I think, in their arsenal, a strong network of loyal brothers, if not an actual blood-related brother that they've alongside with and compounded their efforts. And obviously that's not available in the case for a lot of men, like they're, not born into a family with a brother, or they're not aligned with their brother. But I've found that quite interesting in like studying and looking at people and trying to understand what's been their, competitive advantage or their secret sauce to get ahead.
Yeah, I think the culture at the moment from Western schooling, starting from very young, is actually segregation of that. So I'm seeing depending which schools you go to, which schools you look at things, I'm seeing things like a little bit less emphasis on team sports. And I think people are coming out of high school, and especially when they meet a partner, be it a husband or a wife, it's the culture now to segregate your other half from their team tribe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if there's a young man meets a nice woman, and then it happens both ways. So let's say they fall in love and they start dating. What happens is both parties at the same time try and extract their partner out of their social group to isolate them, to have them more for themselves. And that also that's a big driver in the destruction of the brotherhood and destruction of the tribe and the team. I think that is an enormous mistake unless their team or their tribe is leading them down to do the wrong things.
Yeah, so I see that in less so in some ethnic and religious communities as well. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think they got it down. They've been going by a certain text or a certain book for a long period of time. The technology may have changed, but human nature hasn't. These religious and these cultures have been around for thousands and thousands of years. And the reason they're still around, the reason they're successful is because it works. Those community-based actions working together to solve a problem. I like to hear, for example, I've heard stories of Jewish people I know, if they ever get in, they all help each other. It's crazy that anytime anyone loses a job or gets in trouble, they all just band together and they make sure that person and their family, their whole family's okay.
Yes. Yeah, the other ethnic communities I'm aware of, I see this also, whether it's like Russian community, Korean community, various religious communities, much more like stick together. So in the modern age, like, where do you go as a man? Where do you go to find that brotherhood and you know, how do you find that brotherhood, that code that's going to link you two together? I saw this recently, yesterday, in fact, with a 24-year-old guy, young guy, wants to join a community, find like-minded brothers, really doesn't know where to start. Like, what would you suggest in that situation?
Well, I'll start with something to prepare any person seeking this out. And this isn't either brotherhood too, this is male, female, goes across both sexes, that it's going to be a little bit harder than you think because everyone worth knowing already has a tribe. Unless they're just starting their journey and they're just starting the things they need to do to seek it out. That's actually probably the most likely people you're going to find. And then as you continue looking and as you can continue seeking out this sort of community and brotherhood, you're going to find better and better relationships as time goes by. And the reason you're going to find better and better relationships is because hopefully you're working on yourself at the same time. So at the start, I think the hack and the best way to do it is to reach out to some sort of paid communities. The unpaid ones are just like, if you can't afford to join a paid community, you go to an unpaid one. Just understand that it's going to take order of magnitude more time to find someone who's seriously looking in unpaid than it is paid. If it's themed, if it's something you're into, that would be a great idea. Whether it's golf, Warhammer, cars, makeup, making money, business, find something that you're interested in, get yourself into a paid community. And the hack would be, like I said previously, find someone else who's just started looking as well. You'll be able, if you do it that way, it'll be super fast. You'll be able to find someone and connect with them straight away.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say as well, like, knowing your values and living by your values and communicating your values is going to have a polarizing effect. So it will repel the wrong people and attract the right people. So there's a component there. And then being in proximity or access to the people you can either repel or attract is going to be how you can, over time, create and have that tribe around you. I think that's really, really critical piece as well.
I think that's so important too, because if you haven't figured out what your values and what you want is, how's anyone else ever going to know if they like you if you don't know who you are? So that the repelling and attracting, I think, is a magnificent way to visualize it. Because when you know, I'm just running through it in my head that the more you know who you are, then you just be around people and you be yourself, and that way you're going to repel some, attract others. And the more you know, the more you're going to attract, and the more you're going to repel. So there's less wasting time. Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, polarization is the byproduct of being clear on your values And being clear on your values is going to be a function of self-reflection and personal preference and knowing yourself. And then you're communicating that in the world. And then people are going to be drawn to you or disgusted by you. But yes, you're right. You will save time, energy, and money in the long term.
Yeah, because from the inside looking out, every single person on earth would never believe that some people would be repelled by them, whatever their beliefs are. You know what I mean? And so, like you and I can talk about who wouldn't want to start a family and have some kids and have a successful business, but you'd be surprised that like there's a lot of people that that would say, no way, I don't want to do that. Like, I just want to work my job and, live by myself. I don't want to have any children. I just play video games and I just leave me alone. And that sort of person would probably be repelled by us, but then someone else who shares values would be attracted.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Yeah, so I think it's not just about being in the right rooms or the right places in proximity to people. That is a part of it. But there has to be some kind of polarizing effect. And that happens, primarily through knowing and embodying and communicating your values. As far as like a code and knowing what kind of bro code in the modern era, like I think some things are, self-explanatory, but how do you know what kind of code to go looking for? Like, what are the essentials in essentially like a code of conduct, do you think, among brotherhood in the modern era?
I can answer that. I believe the best way to do it is if you have enough empathy to put yourself in the other person's shoes and then spend a couple of minutes to think, like just 1 or 2 minutes, each individual situations, you'll start to see patterns in each individual circumstance. Put yourself in your brother's shoes in that period of time and think, in an absolute ideal world, what would I want him to do? Or how would I want him to act right now? And then think about that. As long as that's in your best interest and not against any of your values, do that. That's how you get a solid team. That's the hack. Just what's the best thing for them? Like, for example, I was out with one of my friends. We're at a bar last night, and it's a very small thing. It's something that we do regularly, but it was just, he's got a new girlfriend, and not a new girlfriend, but he's been with her a couple of years, but it's new comparatively. And like, he just goes out, like goes to the toilet, and I'm just telling her how awesome he is while he's not there.
Yeah.
And then other little things, like sometimes she'll try and create maybe an argument or maybe a little bit of drama and try and put a little bit of wedge between us. And she found out like really quickly that's never going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then she just she'll never do that behavior ever again. And so that little thing, just those little couple of things, like I said, that story, what would I want him to do if I was there with my wife? That's what I'd want him to do. So I do that for him. And you just do that up front. And that's how, and you live your life, you go through life and you do these things, and all of a sudden you realize that you've got fantastic people around you because they start doing it for you as well. And you actually elevate, even if people don't normally do that, you start doing that for them. They feel the law of reciprocity. They're going to start doing it for you as well.
Yeah. It's like having high standards. And I think there's some universal principles like honor and respect that are obviously traditional and have worked across thousands of generations, thousands of years, multiple generations, and across multiple cultures and multiple religions. And so there's some universal principles there. I think honor and respect are definitely some universal ones as well.
Yeah, the respect is definitely a good start. I think if you haven't got that down yet, don't go to a paid group. Sort that out first, and then go meet people.
Yes. What would you say for men or brothers who are lacking that self-reflection or that self-awareness and haven't diagnosed it within themselves, like what to work on and having that to begin with. Because I've noticed this quite a lot. It seems like a lot of guys like just lack that basic self-awareness about their position.
Yep. I've got an exercise for that. I would encourage every single person listening to do it. Everyone thinks that they are high empathy and they know what people are feeling around them. And as a law of probability, 8 out of 10 people have absolutely no idea. So you listening, you may be in the 20%, probably not. Maybe, just have a think about when you had an interaction with a friend or a family member over the last few days, and think about how much mental energy did you put into solving their problems for them? Were you waiting for your turn to talk, or were you listening to them and trying to help them through whatever their issues are at the moment? Or were they sad? Were you sad with them? Were they happy? Were you happy for them? If not, then you're in the 8 out of 10. You can work on it. You just put yourself in their shoes and then ask, okay, if that was me and I felt the way they were feeling, what would I want someone else to do for me? And then do that for them. And then you practice that and you get good at it.
Yeah, so it's like a skill you can practice.
Yeah. So what was that? Sorry?
Yeah, it comes back to like practicing a skill, putting in effort and hard work.
Well, yeah, everyone's idea is that they're the center of the world and everyone's around them. But what people don't think about is everyone thinks that. So I think that, you think that, every single person in the world thinks they're the center of the universe.
Yeah.
And so it's not natural to sit down and unless you've done possibly sales or high ticket sales, is to sit down and listen to what a person's saying and use all the tools to communication you have, the body language and the words coming out of their mouth, the intonation, the way they're speaking, how fast, how slow, and to try and understand, how can I help this person? If that makes sense, is there a better way that you could think to work on that and to work on the brotherhood thing? Because I was just thinking, instead of coming, I can sit here and say like a bunch of rules. Let's say 5 rules, but that's a bit boring. This is better, and it also applies to everything all the time.
Yeah, I think that's if you're making a conscious, like active choice to improve. I think the only other teacher in that scenario is going to be the brutal consequence of like failure and lack of results. So I'm thinking of an example right now where, I know this person and they just don't have that self-awareness. And so they're experiencing some of the crushing consequence, of that. But until they feel the full weight of it, the force of it, I think they're not going to have the motivation to actually like do something about it.
That's unfortunate, but that's unfortunately how life works, and life's still great. So that's just, there are ups and there's downs, and all the downs are is motivation fuel.
Yes. And the other thing I think I would say, like with that, is not all men are the same. And the analogy that I like to use is, like, you're always going to have some soldiers, you're always going to have some captains and some generals. And it's very important that you understand and have a sense of where you fit. And there'll always be foot soldiers, there'll always be pawns on the chessboard. And simultaneously, there'll always be bishops and knights. And so you have to really understand, like, what kind of person you are, what kind of man you are, and not waste time for the people who are pawns trying to be kings. Like, it's never gonna be that.
Yeah. That's for anyone that's listening. If someone's at any stage a pawn, say, And there is, first of all, there's nothing wrong with that. That's where everyone starts. But they're pretending to be a king, just avoid them.
Yeah,
It's just their problems. It's not worth it. Not worth
exactly.
it. But a lot of the time in these networking groups, the person you want to meet is the one that's actually, depending, kind of quiet. But yeah, because I think, what's your idea on this? I think a lot of the time, most of the time, the people who you really want to know are the ones not looking to meet anyone else because they're just, they've had all these long-term relationships. They're surrounded by great people and they don't really need anything else. And they've they've spent so long seeking it out, finding so many great contacts that they may be at the event, but they're not actively looking. Normally, they're the quiet ones and talking to people they know, and they're being approached by people all the time.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And that's also, you got to be wary of the person who's too available, right? Well, they're too
Yes,
available for a reason.
I think that's 80-20. Like eight times out of 10, there's probably a reason they're so available is because they've tried to make connections several times and haven't looked at themselves, and then people keep saying, "Oh, look, I appreciate the effort, but no, thank you. I'm going to find someone else." But there would be the 20 that they've just realized I need a team and they just started looking. There could be that too, but it's just unlikely.
Yeah, I would say I would say that if you look at how successful guys move and operate, they are always part of like a great team on a strong mission. Um, nobody achieves success like on their own. You can almost tell by like who they're partnered with or who they're friends with. It speaks a lot about like the quality of their decision making.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You can't overstate that enough. That's the quickest way to tell. Or I find, depending on their age, the children is a lot of the time reflection of the parent, and a lot of the time the partner is a reflection of their other partner. So let's say there's a husband and wife, they both influence each other, and so a lot of the time, if one of them is, let's just say, I'll put it nicely, not a very nice person, that normally means that there's some sort of issue there with both with both parties. And it's the same with the friends too. So if you're, find yourself with some sort of networking or you're looking for new friends, and then you meet someone, you go, oh, this person's all right. Like this is nice. We might be able to do something together, whether you're looking for companionship or business or sport, whatever it is. And then you meet one of their friends and their friends comes up and they shake your hand and just come up and say, hey, do you want to make a whole bunch of really crap decisions right now? And then that's just, remember that and put that in the back of your head, because that's what they do all the time.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the mistakes that I see people making is they essentially like make and select friendships or relationships around affinity rather than values, and rather than around like principles or even mission. And I think that's a big mistake. I think that's a function of what happens when you're a kid. You're friends because you grew up in the same area or you went to the same school, or you're friends or because you both like basketball, something like that. And I think continuing that is really childish and really building the house the wrong way. Whereas if you selected your friends and partners on the basis of values, then you've got something solid as a foundation for when things do unravel or are difficult. And people, I don't think, necessarily like operate from that paradigm. So they operate from shared affinity. I think shared affinity is important, but like it should come after. It should be built on the foundation of shared values.
Yes. That's in the Bible. They had this figured out so long ago. I don't know. Why do people keep forgetting? I don't. That's why it's in the Bible, because people just forget this stuff. And yeah, I fully agree. And what's so important to build it on the foundation, not shared affinities, is for that reason and it goes back to, do you know yourself? I think.
Yes.
What are your values? Because if you are connecting with people just on affinities, then their values might be different and they're going to lead you astray.
Yes.
It may be where you want to go, but it's probably not.
Yep. Exactly. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of people make. The one that I see is like actually a big waste of time and energy is typically it's a not an intentional decision. It's usually just circumstantial and based on affinities. Oh, you like photography? I like photography. You like basketball? I like basketball. You traveled to Egypt? I've been to Egypt, you know? Okay, now we're friends. We're gonna, like, that's fine. But
Yeah.
I think that's not the way to build it.
Yeah. Oh, did you see the sandstone triangles too? Yeah, we're friends now. Like, whoa.
Yeah. I would say build it on a foundation of your vision, your values, and your mission. And shared affinity, will be a small part of that, but better to build it with that intentionality. I think for me, like what's happened is because I tend to do that, I probably go through life not connecting with 98% of people. Not in the
That's
sense,
okay.
not in the sense that I don't like connect or like people, but there's not a direct match because I'm not looking at affinity and whether we like the same president or we voted the same way necessarily. I'm looking, what are the values and what's the vision? If the vision is not the same or the values aren't the same, that's great. Not going to come together around brotherhood. It's just going to be circumstantial, acquaintances, let's say. And knowing how to make that distinction is very important because it helps you to understand like where to allocate your time and energy in a way that's like very effective. Everybody's got a limited amount of time and energy. You have to know like where to deploy it, whether it's in the service of your vision and your values and your goals. And rather than just being, wasteful and or influenced by the people around you. Like it's inevitable that you're going to be influenced by the people you're surrounded by.
Yes.
So you can't choose that, let's say in terms of like the family you're born into, but you can choose it with, all the relationships and the people that you spend time with. That's a byproduct of choices that you're making. Yeah.
Where would you trying to put this in so the level of cutthroatness. So let's say if someone's going out there and they're meeting people, I think you reap what you sow. So if you're going to go out there and be a hyper competitive person that is, like, say, for example, you're going to add value, I'm going to add value to you, you're going to add value to me. But if you make like one mistake, I'm going to cut you off and find someone else. There's like that side of the spectrum all the way down to I'm just going to meet someone. And if we share the same affinity, let's say our shirt the same color, we're now fast friends for life. And no matter what, I'm going to be your friend. Where do you think is the correct balance between like that super cutthroat person where they may be not using the optimal strategy because they're cutting people off too fast, and then all the way back to, I like you because we're in the same color shirt, we're friends forever, and I'm just going to believe everything you say? How would you balance that for people trying to figure this out?
The analogy I have for that is like thinking of yourself like a country, and a country has diplomatic relationships with other countries and for various reasons. And there's always going to be other countries around. So the way I like to think of it is if you think of yourself like a country, you're going to have almost like an international relations policy, you're going to be diplomatic with other nations because you're aware that the other nations you're going to have to trade with and work with and vice versa. Sometimes you have good trade relations, international relations with certain countries. You strengthen those ties. At other times, like they're just there. So I think it's just about being discerning and having a sense of your own personal sovereignty, and ultimately doing what's best for the sovereignty, like, of your own nation, and understanding that having diplomatic relations with other nations is very important, like, to this ongoing success of the sovereignty of your own nation. And if people did that, then obviously when people make mistakes, when countries make mistakes, like, you don't write them off and terminate it completely. Yeah, I mean, you might, and depending on, like, the level of threat or whatever it is. Typically, like, it's not necessary too. And the other thing is, you know, you decide, like, as a country, how you want to exercise sovereignty. So it's just about, I think, having some self-reflection on how you like to do it. The way I like to do it is, I like to have, like, I like to be part of, like, a small, strong alliance, and I'm not super concerned about being friends with everybody. I just like a small alliance of strong nations, like, kind of like BRICS or NATO or something. And I want to invest my time in those alliances. And the other is, like, I'm open, friendly guy, like, happy to connect, but it's not going to get a lot of my time and energy. I just don't think the return is worthwhile. And that's the same policy I think countries take. They understand that there's certain alliances to be part of. So
Yeah.
that's my view on it. Now, I think if people adopted the same view, like, well, yeah, what's your take on that?
No, I think that's spot on. I'd never thought of it previously about being a nation, because yeah, I was trying to figure out a way to frame it, and yeah, I couldn't think of anything better than that, because it's not a one or a zero. It could
Yeah,
also
it's not
be
binary.
standby. Yeah, it's not a binary thing. And also, as you were explaining that, I was thinking as well about what we were speaking about previously, about the person you want to meet at the networking group isn't seeking out other people. So you basically just described exactly the sort of person that you want to go and meet isn't actively seeking out. You'll just, if he's open and he's got a little bit of bandwidth left, he'll have a coffee with you, and you need to impress him. That's how it works. So you're explaining the mindset of someone who is already there, per se. And I was hoping anyone listening was picking up on that and can also reverse engineer that to help themselves connect with the sort of people that would be good to connect with, guys like yourself.
Yeah, and why do people want to trade and do business with certain countries? It's because they have their shit in order.
Yeah,
Countries operating well, and so it's clear, and so they have good borders. They have, like, the right amount of tariffs. Like, so it's the same thing, like, with a person or as an individual. You have your stuff in order, you become more attractive to trade with, and so, like, that is a huge part of, like, if you're talking about, like, growing and building a network over time, or, like, being part of something, well, you've got to be an attractive nation to trade with, per se.
yeah.
So that requires, like, some self-reflection too. Like, what can you offer, in the international marketplace?
I think that's really good. And also, you can certainly broaden your horizons on what you can trade with. So let's say we use trade. Let's say I have oil, you have oil. Some people might instantly say, "Oh, what are you going to do? Ship each other oil? It's just inefficient." No. Why don't we sit down and have a discussion about how we're refining it? And so I'm going to give you my ideas, you give me your ideas, and then as time goes on, we can just continue to have a good diplomatic relationship. And through the passage of time, over a longer time period, we're going to be able to outcompete other people by sharing ideas. So we're not the only people that sell oil. There might be 100 other people that sell oil. Let's us share ideas. So we're number one and two. I'm not going to worry if you're number one, if I'm number two. But if we're sharing ideas, we can outcompete everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. Like, that's an excellent way to look at it. I think that is a great way to think about, like, in the modern era, it's about it's about being a sovereign nation that is trading really well. And like the reality is that in the digital world now, it's about, I think, network states. So it's strengthening your position about being in a positive position, like within a network state or like together with other network states. And, like in trade, between nations, like they need to know like your constitution, your principles, your cultural customs. Like it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
I really like that analogy. When I think about it, sometimes I think, yeah, it's like this is the analogy that works for me.
Well, yeah, it's great. And I like the Constitution as well. Like you could be, Australia, and you're like, I want to trade with Iran. And then you start opening up documents, death to America. Hang on a sec. Sorry, guys, I don't think this is going to work. Like, all the best.
Exactly.
And that's okay. That's the byproduct of being polarizing. They repelled what they don't want. You've repelled what you don't want as well. And so you're not wasting each other's time. So you don't get a few years down the road and then they're like, oh yeah, let's work together to destroy this person. And then you say, well, first of all, why do you want to destroy someone? That's just a massive use of energy. It means you've got zero emotional control.
Yeah,
and yeah, you're just starting, why are you starting wars? And if you haven't figured that out early, then you can be led down that road.
Yeah, and I think that's the work to do, like when you're young. Like when you're young, you may not have a lot to offer in terms of trade. And so that's when that's the time to work on like your constitution and your diplomatic policies. That's the time to kind of do that internal work, and you become stronger, you become, better. And then that allows you, when you do have those like opportunities for trade, like you're coming from a position of clarity and strength. And I think that is, what being young allows you to do. That's the move to make. Maybe you don't have money to like invest into, paid communities or paid digital, networking groups, things like that. Like, so maybe not like when you're young, but that doesn't mean you can't work on the internal things that make you stronger as a nation. And so when the time comes, you could be invited in, like with BRICS right now, like they're actively recruiting and inviting in certain nations in order to strengthen like the overall position. And, the way they look at that is they see that there's some growth and some potential in certain countries. So they think, oh, they would be a strong member in this alliance. Great. You just got to read the terrain, see where it's going.
Yes. Just for the young person thing, it's disheartening when I see people say that, because in regards to they don't have anything, but they do. One of the things they do have is availability and time. For someone who's busy and someone who is already well established, they don't have availability and they don't have time. And so something as easy as, if you wanted to break into their circle, one suggestion could be that, let's say they run a business, let's say, I don't know, pick a business, construction, and you have availability and you go to that person, you say that you want to work for them, you want to learn from them, they say no. You can then still leave the door open and say, look, I understand that I may not have the skills yet, but I'm going to go away and I'm going to start learning things. And every day I'm going to become better at this. And at any point you're stuck, someone calls in sick, something happens, you need someone to answer the phone, you ring me, I'll come. I'll work for free. I'll answer your phone for free. And just something as simple as that. And then all of a sudden you've got a foot in the door, and they were stuck at the time because they don't have what you have, which is availability. And so all of a sudden they need someone to do something. Maybe someone's sick, they need someone to drive their family to church, whatever, it doesn't matter. But you can solve a small problem for them using your availability. Then you've got a foot in the door. And then also what you have through the law of reciprocity, that person is going to feel like they're going to want to give you something back. And if that person's a high value person, and what we're speaking about before, they understand with empathy and they can put themselves in your shoes, they're going to know what you want, and you want to learn the industry. So what you're going to get back in return for doing some sort of mundane task that they couldn't do because they're super busy, you're going to get a foot in the door and they're going to start telling you industry secrets and being in that circle. And that's how you get to start.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I've heard as well, like, for example, like in Silicon Valley, like one of the best jobs to take when you're young is a chief of staff position, because it just allows you to, maybe the work you're doing is, you know, maybe menial compared to other positions, but what it does give you is like just unparalleled access. And if you're able to take advantage of that, it allows you to move up quite quickly. And that's hard to like see when you're young. When you're young, it's like, it's also about thinking a certain way, like having a mindset about how to perceive and look at your situation. So yeah, you're right. When you're young, you have the benefit of time. When you're older, you have money but no time. And so like,
Hopefully.
yeah, hopefully. So that's like, yeah, that's typically like how it breaks down. But I like that a lot. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Reciprocity. What do you think we wrap it up here?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Awesome. Thank you everyone for joining us on the J3VC podcast. Like and subscribe. If you want more of this, we're going to have more videos. Check out our social media pages and stay safe, everyone. I look forward to speaking to you on the next one. Thanks very much, Jason.
Cool. Thank you, guys.